Good evening. I'm back home visiting in California, so I have a really special setting for you tonight to tell a fireside fairy tale. I'm outside, it's beautiful and warm, but luckily not too hot, and the moon is so big and full and gorgeous, and I just can't think of a more perfect place to share a story with you. I've just finished a translation of what we call Thumbelina, but what in the original Danish was called Tommelise. And I also have something that I'm even more excited about, which is an American marshmallow. I do live in England, and we can get perfectly decent marshmallows there, but I got to admit, the American ones are just a little bit fluffier. The English ones have a tendency to go a bit sticky the second you open the bag, and these ones are just a bit nicer, so I'm really looking forward to eating this one. And as I get going with my toasting here, I will tell you a little bit about this story. I actually won't have very much commentary to give on this one because one of the things that I like about the writing of Hans Christian Andersen is that it's very straightforward. He kind of avoids figures of speech or ideas that don't translate well into other cultures. And I don't know if that's because he's a more modern writer. He was writing in the 19th century and he knew that his work would be read by an international audience, or if that was just his speaking and writing style, I couldn't say. But there really isn't that much to explain in terms of context. This story was written in 1835, and it was published in a short collection of children's stories, but this is the best known one. Now, in English, we call this story Thumbelina, because the Danish word tommel, T-O-M-M-E-L, does mean thumb, but what it actually means is tomme, or inch. So the real name of the character is Tommelise, Lisa being Lisa, or, girl's name. And it literally just means inch Lisa. But for some reason that's gotten translated into English over the years as Thumb Lisa or Thumbelina. So just kind of a fun fact you might enjoy. This one's fun. It's got some nice humor in it and some interesting, I think, commentary on culture where you get the field mouse who's very vulgar and grasping about wealth. But other than that, I hope you enjoy this story, and I hope I get to enjoy this marshmallow. There once was a woman who wanted very much to have a little bitty child, but didn't know how to make it happen. So she went to an old witch and said to her, "With all my heart, I've wished for a little child. Couldn't you tell me where I might get one from?" "Surely we can get that sorted out," said the witch. "There's a grain of barley for you. It's not at all like the ones that grow in the fields of the farmers, or like the ones that the chickens eat. Put it in a flower pot. Then you'll have a sight to see." "You will have my thanks," said the woman, as she gave the witch 12 shillings. Then she went home, planted the grain of barley, and straightway a big, beautiful bloom burst up. It was like a tulip, but with the petals pinched together as if it were still a bud. "That is a lovely flower," said the woman, and she kissed its pretty red and yellow petals. But as she kissed it, the flower let out a great bang and opened up. One could see now that it was a tulip after all, but in the middle of the flower, on a green chair, sat a little bitty girl, all fine and fair. She was not even an inch long, and therefore she was called Tommelise. A neatly varnished walnut shell was given to her for a cradle, with blue-violet petals for her mattress and a rose petal as her blanket. There she slept at night, but in the day she played on the table, where the woman had set a plate, around which she had placed a whole garland of flowers with their stems stuck in the water. Here floated a tulip petal on which Tommelise sat and sailed from one side of the plate to the other, with 2 white horsehairs to row with. It looked just delightful. She could also sing, oh, so fine and lovely, as one had never heard. One night, as she lay in her beautiful bed, a hideous toad came hopping in through a broken pane in the window. The toad was so ugly, big, and wet. It jumped right down onto the table where Tommelise lay sleeping under the red rose petal. "She will make a fine wife for my son," said the toad. And then she grabbed the walnut shell where Tommelise was sleeping and jumped through the window pane away into the garden. There ran a large, wide stream. Right at the bank it was swampy and muddy. Here lived the toad with her son. Ugh! He was also ugly and hideous, just like his mother. All he could say when he saw the pretty little girl in the walnut shell was, "Coax, coax, brekkekekex." "Do not talk so loud or she will wake up," said the old toad. "She could still run from us, for she is as light as the swan's down. Let's set her out in the river on one of the broad water lily leaves. That will be like an island for her, as she is so light and little. She can't run away there while we go prepare our mansion under the mud, where you will make a life together." Out in the river grew many water lilies with the broad green leaves that look as if they float in the water. The leaf that was furthest out was also the largest. The old toad swam to it, and there she left Tommelise in the walnut shell. The poor little bitty thing woke up very early in the morning, and when she saw where she was, she began to cry bitterly, for there was water on all sides of the big green leaf. She could not get to shore at all. The old toad sat down in the mud and decorated her place with rushes and yellow duckweed. She thought that would be just right for her new daughter-in-law. Then she swam with her ugly son out to the lily pad where Tommelise stood. They wanted to collect her nice bed so it could wait for her down in the bridal chamber. The old toad bent down so deep in the water for her and said, "May I introduce my son? He shall be your husband, and you shall live so delightfully down in the mud." "Coax, coax, brekkekekex," was all the son could say. They took the pretty little bed and swam away with it, while Tommelise sat all alone and cried on the green lily pad because she didn't want to live with the foul toad or have her hideous son for her husband. The small fish that swam down in the water had seen the toad and heard what she said. Therefore they stuck their heads up to have a look at the little girl. As soon as they saw her, they thought she was so pretty that it hurt them to imagine that she should go down to live with the ugly toad. No, that must never be. They flocked down in the water around the green stalk that held the lily pad she was standing on, gnawed it with their teeth, and then the lily pad floated away down the stream with Tommelise, far away, where the toad could not follow. Tommelise sailed past many towns. The little birds sitting in the bushes saw her and sang, "What a pretty little maiden!" The lily pad swept her farther and farther away, and so Tommelise came into another land. A pretty little white butterfly kept flying around her and sat down on the lily pad because it liked Tommelise so much, and she was so happy, for now the toad could not reach her, and it was so lovely where she was sailing. The sun shone on the water, and it was like the most beautiful gold. Then she took her belt and tied one end to the butterfly. The other end of the line she fastened to the lily pad. It then glided away much more quickly, and she with it, because she was standing on the lily pad. At the same time, a big old doodlebug came flying by. It caught sight of her, and in the blink of an eye, it wrapped its claws around her slender body and flew up the tree with her. But the green lily pad floated down the river, and the butterfly flew with it, because he was bound to the lily pad and could not get loose. Goodness, how frightened poor Tommelise was when the doodlebug flew up a tree with her, but she was even sadder about the beautiful white butterfly she had tied to the lily pad. If he couldn't get loose, he would starve to death. But the doodlebug didn't care. It sat down with her on the biggest green leaf in the tree, gave her nectar from flowers to drink, and even said that she was very pretty, although she didn't look anything like a doodlebug. Then all the other doodlebugs who lived in the tree came to pay a visit. One lady doodlebug pulled on her antennae and said, "She only has 2 legs. She looks pitiful." "She has no antennae," said the other. "She's so skinny. Blech! She looks like a human being." "How ugly she is," said all the doodlebugs. And yet Tommelise was so pretty. The doodlebug who had taken her thought so too, but when all the others said she was ugly, it changed its mind and didn't want her at all. The bugs said that Tommelise could go wherever she pleased. They flew her down from the tree and set her on a gooseberry. There she cried because she was so ugly that even doodlebugs did not want her. But truly she was the most beautiful thing one could imagine, as fine and radiant as the most beautiful rose petal. All summer long, poor Tommelise lived all alone in the great forest. She wove a bed of grass and hung it under a large dock leaf so she could be sheltered from the rain. She collected nectar from the flowers and drank the dew from the leaves every morning. So went summer and autumn, but now came the winter, the cold, long winter. All the birds that had sung so beautifully to her flew away. The leaves on the trees and the petals on the flowers withered. The great dock leaf under which she had lived rolled up and became only a yellow, withered stalk. She froze so terribly, for her clothes were torn, and she herself was so slim and small. Poor Tommelise! She seemed likely to freeze to death. It began to snow, and every snowflake that fell on her was like someone throwing an enormous shovelful on you or me, for we are big, and she was only an inch tall. So she wrapped herself in a withered leaf, but it would not warm her, and she shivered with cold. But I don't have to shiver with cold because it's nice and warm out here on this summer evening, and this marshmallow is perfectly toasted. I was watching it carefully. I saw it sliding. Don't worry. So now I've got my lovely, toasted, perfectly squishy, gooey American marshmallow, and I'm all ready to enjoy my treat, unlike poor Tommelise. There are a lot of things that I like about living in England, and so many treats that I enjoy. But you can't beat an American marshmallow. They're just better. I wonder how many bags of those I could fit in my luggage. Well, now let's see what happens to poor little Tommelise. Just outside the forest, she came to a large field of grain. But the harvest was long over. Only the bare, dry stumps stood up from the frozen ground. They were like a whole forest for her to walk through. Oh, she shivered so badly from the cold. Then she came to a field mouse's door. It was a little hole under the stumps of the harvested grain. There the field mouse lived warm and well, had a whole room full of grain, a lovely kitchen, and a pantry. Poor Tommelise stood inside the door like a poor beggar girl and asked for a little piece of barleycorn, for she had not had a bite to eat in 2 days. "You poor little thing," said the field mouse, for she was a good old field mouse after all. "Come into my warm room and eat with me." She liked Tommelise right away and said, "You may live with me this winter if you'll keep my home nice and neat and tell me stories, for I am very fond of them." Tommelise was happy to agree and did as the good old field mouse asked. "Now, we'll have visitors soon," said the field mouse. "My neighbor usually visits me every weekday. His home is even finer than mine. He has large rooms and wears a lovely black velvet coat. If only you could have him as a husband, then you would be well settled. But he can't see a thing. You must tell him the most beautiful stories, you know." But Tommelise didn't like the sound of that. She didn't want to marry this neighbor, for he was a mole. He came for a visit in his black velvet coat. "He's so rich and clever," said the field mouse. His house was more than 20 times bigger than the field mouse's, and he was well read, but he couldn't stand the sun or the beautiful flowers. He spoke ill of them because he had never seen them. Tommelise had to sing for him, and she performed both Doodlebug Fly Fly and The Monk Goes to the Meadow. Then the mole fell in love with her because of her beautiful voice. But he was sensible and didn't say anything about it at first. He had recently dug a long path through the earth between the two houses, and the field mouse and Tommelise were invited to walk in it whenever they wanted to. He told them not to be afraid of a dead bird that lay in the tunnel. It was a whole bird with feathers and beak, which must have just died as winter began, and was now buried just where the passage was built. The mole took a bit of wood in his mouth that shined like fire in the dark and lit the way for them in the long, dark path. When they came to where the dead bird lay, the mole put his broad nose into the ceiling and pushed up the earth to make a large hole so the light could shine down. In the middle of the floor lay a dead swallow. with its beautiful wings pressed tight to its sides and its legs and head tucked under its feathers. The poor bird must have died of cold. It caused Tommelise a great pain because she loved all little birds so much. All summer they had sung and chirped for her so beautifully, but the mole nudged it with his stumpy legs and said, "Now it doesn't chirp any more. Must be lousy to be born a little bird. Thank goodness none of my children will be like that. Birds like that do nothing but chirp, and then they starve in winter." "Yes, that's so. What a sensible thing to say," said the field mouse. "What does the bird get for all of its chirping when winter comes? It will only starve and freeze. But of course it had to be so big." Tommelise said nothing, but when the two others had turned their backs on the bird, she bent down, pushed aside the feathers that covered its head, and kissed its closed eyes. "Maybe this was the one who sang so beautifully for me this summer," she thought. "How it brought me such happiness, this darling, beautiful bird." The mole blocked up the hole through which the daylight had come, and then followed the ladies home. But that night, Tommelise couldn't sleep at all. She got up from her bed and wove a large, beautiful blanket of hay. She carried it down and spread it over the dead bird. She tucked soft cotton, which she had found in the field mouse's house, all around the sides of the bird, so it could rest warm in the cold, dark earth. "Farewell, you beautiful little bird," she said. "Farewell, and thank you for your lovely song in summer when all the trees were green and the sun shone so warm on us." Then she laid her head on the bird's breast, but was instantly startled, for she heard a knocking sound. It was the bird's heart. The bird was not dead. It had laid in a trance, and now that it was warm, it came back to life again. In the fall, all the swallows fly away to the warm lands, but if one waits too long, it freezes and falls down dead. It remains where it falls, and the cold snow settles over it. Tommelise trembled all over from fright, for the bird was a big, big creature compared to her, and she was only an inch long. But she plucked up her courage, tucked the cotton around the poor swallow, and fetched the mint leaf that she used for her own blanket, and placed it over the bird's head. The next night, she tiptoed down to it again. It was quite alive, but so weak that it could only open its eyes for a moment to see Tommelise, who stood with a bit of wood in her hand, for she had nothing else to make light. "I give you my thanks, you pretty little child," said the sick swallow to her. "I have been warmed up wonderfully. Soon my strength will come back, and I will fly once more into the warm sunshine." "Oh," she said, "it's so cold outside. It's snowing and freezing. Stay in your warm bed, and I will look after you." She brought water to the swallow in a flower petal. It drank and told her how one of its wings had been torn on a thorn bush. Then it couldn't fly as well as the other swallows who went away, far away to the warm lands. At last it fell to the earth, but it remembered no more, not even how it had come to where it was. All winter the swallow remained, and Tommelise was good to it and loved it very much. Neither the mole nor the field mouse knew anything about it, for they couldn't stand to go near the poor swallow. When spring came and the sun warmed the earth, the swallow said farewell to Tommelise, who opened the hole that the mole had made. The sun shone so beautifully on them, and the swallow asked if she would like to come along. Tommelise could sit on its back, and they would fly far into the green forest. But Tommelise knew that the old field mouse would be very sad if she left in such a way. "No, I cannot," said Tommelise. "Farewell, farewell, you good, pretty girl," said the swallow as it flew out into the sunshine. Tommelise watched it go, and tears came to her eyes, for she loved the poor swallow dearly. "Kvivit, kvivit," sang the bird as it flew into the green forest. Tommelise was so downhearted. She was not allowed to go out into the warm sunshine. The grain that had been sown in the farmland across from the field mouse's house grew high up through the air. It was like a thick forest for the poor little girl, who was only 1 inch tall. "Now it's time to sew your wedding clothes," said the field mouse to her. For now her neighbor, the boring mole in his black velvet coat, had proposed to her. "You must have both wool and linen. You must have something to sit on and lie on when you are the mole's wife." Tommelise had a lot of spinning to get through, so the field mouse hired 4 spiders to spin and weave night and day. Every evening the mole would visit and talk about how he couldn't wait for summer to be over, and then the sun wouldn't shine so hot and burn the earth as solid as a stone. Yes, when the summer was over, he could have his wedding and marry Tommelise. But she was not at all pleased, for she did not like the boring mole. Every morning when the sun came up, and every evening when it went down, she sneaked out the door, and when the wind parted the tops of the barley stalks, she could see the blue sky and think of how bright and beautiful it was in the world outside. She wished so much that she might see her dear swallow again, but it never came back, as it must have flown far away into the beautiful green forest. When the fall arrived, all of Tommelise's wedding clothes were ready. "In 4 weeks you will be married," said the field mouse to her. But Tommelise cried and said that she didn't want to marry the dull mole. "Fiddlesticks," said the field mouse. "Don't be obstinate or I'll bite you with my white teeth. You're getting a delightful husband. You think his black velvet coat isn't good enough for you, your majesty? He has a full kitchen and cellar. You should thank God for him." And so came the wedding day. The mole had already come to fetch Tommelise. She was to live with him deep under the earth, never to come out into the hot sun, for he couldn't abide it. The poor child was so miserable. She had to say goodbye to the beautiful sun, which she had only been able to look at from the field mouse's door. "Farewell, bright sun," she said, and threw her small arms around a little red flower that stood there. "Tell the little swallow I said hello, if by chance you see it." "Kvivit, kvivit," came the call from overhead in that very moment. She looked up, and it was the little swallow who had just flown by. As soon as it saw Tommelise, it was so pleased. She told the bird how much she hated to have the ugly old mole for a husband, and that she would have to live deep under the earth where the sun never shone. She couldn't help but cry at all of this. "Now the cold winter is coming," said the little swallow. "I am flying far away to the warm lands. Won't you come with me? You can sit on my back, tie yourself on tight, and we'll fly away from the ugly mole in his dark rooms, far away over mountains to the warm lands, where the sun shines more beautifully than here, where it is always summer with lovely flowers. Just fly away with me, you sweet little Tommelise, who saved my life when I lay frostbitten in that dark underground tunnel." "Yes, I will come with you," said Tommelise. She climbed up on the bird's back with her feet on its outstretched wings. She tied her belt fast to one of the strongest feathers, and so the swallow flew high into the air, over forest and over lake, high up over the great mountains where there is always snow. Tommelise was chilled in the cold air, but she snuggled down under the swallow's warm feathers and only stuck out her little head to see all the beauty below her. So they came to the warm lands. The sun shone much brighter than in her homeland. The sky was twice as high, and in plowed rows the most delightful green and blue grapes grew on trellises. In the forests hung lemons and oranges. Here it smelled of myrtle and mint, and on the country roads the most beautiful children ran and played with large, colorful butterflies. But the swallow flew further still, and the land grew more and more beautiful. Under the loveliest green trees by a blue lake stood a shining white marble castle from ancient times. Vines twirled around the tall pillars, and at the top were many swallows' nests. In one of these lived the swallow who carried Tommelise. "Here is my house," said the swallow. "But if you will now choose one of the great big flowers that grow down there, I will set you on it, and you will find it just as pleasant as you could wish." "That sounds lovely," she said, clapping her small hands. A large white marble pillar had fallen to the ground and broken into 3 pieces. Between these grew the most beautiful large white flowers. The swallow flew down with Tommelise and set her on one of the broad leaves. But how she was astonished! There in the middle of the flower sat a little man as white and clear as if he were made of glass. On his head was the most beautiful gold crown, and on his shoulders were the most beautiful clear wings. He was no bigger than Tommelise, and he was a flower angel. In every flower there lived such a little man or woman, but he was the king of them all. "Goodness, how handsome he is," whispered Tommelise to the swallow. The little prince was so frightened of the swallow, for it was a giant bird to him who was so little and fine. But when he saw Tommelise, he was so happy. She was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. He took the golden crown from his head and put it on hers, asked to learn her name, and if she would be his wife and become queen of all the flowers. Yes, he was a man indeed, different from the son of the toad and the mole with the black velvet coat. She said yes to the handsome prince, and from every flower came a lady or gentleman, so beautiful it was a pleasure to see them. Each one brought Tommelise a present, but the best gift of all was a pair of beautiful wings from a large white fly. They were attached to Tommelise's back, and then she could fly from flower to flower. There was such happiness, and the little swallow sat up in its nest and sang to them as best he could. But in his heart he was forlorn, for he loved Tommelise so much and never wanted to be parted from her. "You shouldn't be called Tommelise," said the flower angel to her. "That's an ugly name, and you are so beautiful. We will call you Maya." "Farewell, farewell," said the little swallow, as it flew once more from the warm lands, far away, back to Denmark. There he had a little nest above the window where the man lives who can tell fairy tales. For him he sang, "Kvivit, kvivit." And that's where we got the whole story. I suspect Hans Christian Andersen maybe deserves a little bit more credit than that, although he certainly got the inspiration from a swallow. I always loved that story when I was a little girl because the story of the journey to the warm lands always reminded me of my home here in Southern California, where the sun is very bright and the sky does seem so big, and we have beautiful mountains that you can soar over, and the little swallows come and go for the seasons, and we do have very beautiful flowers. I always imagined that the flower that Tommelise was set down on was what's called a madalija poppy. Those are not really known much outside California. They're also sometimes called a fried egg flower. They're absolutely massive and white, and they have a beautiful, roughly yellow center. And they're just a lovely flower and very, very magical. So I always imagined that that was the type of flower that the king of the fairies lived in, and the sort that Tommelise got to finally make a happy home in after escaping a nasty frog, who's definitely not boyfriend material, and an overbearing mole who might have had money but wouldn't make her happy. She finally found a home with someone who actually would treat her right, someone who was literally willing to take the crown off of his own head and say, "I will bow down to you, come and be my queen." That sounds pretty good to me. I hope you enjoyed that story, and if there's another story by Hans Christian Andersen that you'd like to hear in the future, do let me know. Also, if you enjoyed this story when you were a kid, or now that you tell it to other kids, what sort of landscapes do you imagine when you read it? What part of the world do you think that Tommelise is traveling to? I'd love to hear from you, and I look forward to sharing another story with you soon by the fire. Thanks for listening.